First and foremost, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Hope everybody had a nice holiday with their family. That's also why this video is just a little bit late today. Really didn't have a whole lot of time to preemptively make a video for today, and so the day after we are making this Scathach video. Secondly, you guys might be wondering why I'm doing the Scathach video right now when Moriarty is the one on raid up currently. Well, that means later tonight, Scathach is going to be the server that's going to be going on raid up, so I figured put this video out beforehand so it gives people time to kind of look over Scathach and for me to explain how good she is and whether or not you should be summoning for her or not. So little announcements out of the way. But yeah, in today's video, we're going to be talking about her. A very solid servant overall, but I do have some qualms here and there with her. So we'll kind of talk about that throughout the entire video, but she's definitely a good servant overall. If you guys enjoy FGO content, I upload these videos every single day. And all I ask for in return is a like on the video and a subscribe to the channel. It really does help your boy out on his road to 100k, so help your boy out. If you want extra content, you can either click that join button to become a channel member, or come out to the streams where I do stream on Twitch every single weekday, or I'm at least trying my best to stream every single weekday. Again, your boy is a college student, so gotta be on that homework grind, gotta balance it sometimes, so if we miss a stream, we miss a stream, but I am trying my absolute best to stream every day on Twitch. That is linked down in the description down below. But let's not just schmuck around at all with this video. Let's just go ahead and start talking about Scathach, starting off with her hits. And this is probably something that's really notorious with this servant, because her hits, to say the least, are really whack. So she has a really solid NP gain rate at 0.71%. That's not bad at all. Even her star gen being at 12.2%, that's not bad at all either. The thing that's kind of whack with Scathach is that she's a quick servant with really weak quick cards. She's only packing 2 quick cards with 2 hits each. And that really hurts the effectiveness of the servant, because you really want to be doing quick chains because she's a quick servant, but you're not really going to be doing a whole lot of star genning with her quick cards, and you're not going to be doing a whole lot of NP genning either because the hits are just so low. Now, thankfully, her arts card is really solid because of the high natural NP gen and the decent hits at 3. As long as you can get a crit on this arts card when it appears, you can refund a decent bit of NP. But the actual strategy for genning NP with Scathach is to actually do an arts buster chain, because leading off with the arts card actually allows the buster cards to now have the ability to gen NP, and because they have 6 hits each, this is one of the few times that you'll actually see buster cards gen NP. And even though it's not very efficient, this is the most efficient way to do it with Scathach. Honestly, I think if they wanted to buff Scathach, they could just swap the hits on her buster cards and her quick cards, and overnight that would make her insanely broken. It would almost fix a lot of the issues I do have with the servant, but unfortunately, this is like one of the weird quick servants that when they first came out, DW didn't give them super OP quick cards, because you look at Jack and Okita, who are also year 1 single target quick servants, and they have absolutely broken quick cards because DW at the very beginning of the game didn't really think quick cards were all that good, but then nowadays they're basically just pseudo arts cards that gen a lot of stars and can do really good damage because of people like Scotty and Van Gogh. Now, fortunately, Scathach does get a little bit of saving grace with that 7-hit extra attack. If you don't know, the extra attack is a composite card that gens stars, NP, and does big boy damage. And because she actually has really high natural NP gain and a decent natural star gen stat, that extra attack is going to be very, very useful, especially with appending it. If you don't know, in JP we have append skills where you can get like 3 bonus skills. One of them actually buffs the effectiveness of the extra attack by 50%, and because she has a 7-hit extra attack with already high natural base stats, that is actually going to hit different, and it's going to make your brave chains look really strong. But yeah, already, even though Scathach kind of has a way to get around her whack quick cards, it's still kind of an issue that's built into the servant. Thankfully, when we get to her skills, they've kind of done things to patch up her skills, because her skills had some year 1 issues going into them, namely skill 1, but they have gone back and retroactively fixed this by buffing her second skill, which we'll talk about in this video as well. So starting off with skill 1, it's not a bad skill because it's giving her an 80% chance to get 50% crit damage, and then a separate proc to get an 80% chance of 500% crit star absorption for 3 turns, as well as an evasion for 1 turn, all on a 5-turn cooldown. So for 1, it's an evasion or your survivability skill on low cooldown. That in and of itself is pretty good, because usually survivability skills are not on 5-turn cooldowns. Usually they're pushing like 6-7 turns. So that's really good because she is a boss killing servant. You do want to bring her to harder content. That's kind of the whole point of using Scathach. So that in and of itself is already really good. It's just there's an inconsistency issue with her getting the crit damage and the star weight, which is supposed to supplant the fact that she's only really doing big damage once every few turns. So because you fire the NP and then you can't really do anything else with the NP for a couple turns, the crit damage is supposed to help you kind of make up for that and still let her not be a wet paper towel in the meantime. But because it was chance based, it was always kind of annoying and inconsistent if you were going to get this off. But then they buffed her second skill, which originally was just a 50% quick mana burst that was targetable, which did make it pretty good for utility. But now it's a targetable quick mana burst that also buffs that ally's buff success rate by 20% for 3 turns and charges their NP gauge by 20%. Obviously meant to be given to Scathach herself, because that 20% buff success rate actually just does add into the 80% chance that she has for those buffs. It makes it a 100% chance to get the crit damage and the star weight, and that helps her out so much because, as you'll see, the quick buff that she's getting only lasts for 1 turn. So you can get 1 really big turn with the NP, but then you have to wait 5 turns to get it back. So she's definitely more on like the 1 pump chump side of things when it comes to FGO servants, which was really good back in the day, but is not as good anymore, and I will explain that at the end of the video. She still will do a lot of big boy damage, but 1 turn of big damage kind of got nerfed a little bit whenever they introduced break bars. Although that's the whole point of them trying to help her get her crit buff back, because then she can at least do something on the turns that she's waiting to get her NP back. But then the 20% battery also is very nice. I kind of wish this was a 30% battery, because not only would she be able to get a 50% battery with the 30% and the 20% append skill, but it also kind of makes it for the fact that her kit isn't really very good at genning NP. So I kind of wish it was pushing like 30% or higher. 30% is kind of the sweet spot nowadays. That's at least what you want with the introduction of a pen skill. So 20% is just a little power crept. Like, it just unfortunately came out a little bit too early before a pen skills came out. If she got this buff today, I'm pretty sure they just would have given her 30%, but we'll take the battery nonetheless. Just unfortunate to see that it's not 30%. And then finally there's her third skill, and this is kind of what helps Scathach be an absolute nuking servant. She gets a really big damage mod of 100% against divine enemies for 1 turn, and a separate 100% buff against undead enemies for 1 turn as well. Now, undead really doesn't matter all that much, because as a boss killing servant, you're really not fighting a lot of undead servants. That's not exactly something that's super common, because no undead servants even exist in the first place. So that's why that's never really talked about. But divine, we do talk about that, because not only are there a lot, or just a decent bit of divine enemies in the game, there's a decent chunk of divine servants in the game. And with her getting a really high 100% damage mod against them, you can actually bring her type neutral against them and still chunk them for a massive amount of damage, especially because, and I'll just move into her NP. Her NP has a massive stun on them as well, so even then, you don't really have to worry about going in type neutral and getting smacked by them or something, or just getting obliterated because you don't have defense against them due to type advantage, because you have a 500% chance to stun them, which does buy you another turn to just not get smacked up. It also just does a whole lot of damage because it is a buffed NP, although the overcharge of having an insta-kill really doesn't matter all that much. You're probably never going to get that off. Scathach doesn't really have anything that specs into that insta-kill to really make that bite. She's no Nidochris or Shiki or anything, like, come on, let's be real. But with all that being said, like, what are my issues with Scathach? Well, first and foremost, my main issue is the fact that she's kind of specialized for year 1 gameplay. So if you guys don't know, year 1 FGO was like the reign of characters like Jalter and Scathach, just servants that could output a massive amount of damage in 1 turn, because none of the boss fights had break bars. It was literally just beat up this big chunky boy and move about your day. So it didn't really matter if you had a good servant that had like 3 good consistent turns, or they could loop their NP a lot, because you would just go for the servant that could do more damage because they only had 1 HP bar anyway. But now with the advent of break bars, you want those consistent servants that can only do one big damaging turn every 5 turns, they're not as good anymore. Because you want a servant that can consistently output damage, because you don't want to be in those fights for long periods of time, because the bosses usually have debuffs that they'll start stacking or they'll start buffing themselves. So you're really trying to end those fights in as few turns as possible, usually 3 turns. Because the majority of boss battles now, they usually have about 3 HP bars. That's about the average. If a boss is getting like 4 or 5 HP bars, that's usually a fight you're not supposed to win. You're usually scripted to like beat 1 HP bar, maybe 2, and then the battle ends. So most fights in the game, you're gonna have to go through like 3 HP bars, 2 at the least, 3, 4 maybe at the most. And so it just kind of leaves servants like Scathach in somewhat of a bygone era. Like, obviously she can still do really good damage, which is what I feel like a lot of people are kept up on. Like, they get stuck on that one point where she can do really, really good damage. But you gotta understand that's not exactly what the meta is built around right now. Because the fact is that she gets a quick buff for 1 turn and then has to wait 5 turns to get it back. And then as good as her special damage mod is, she has to wait 4 turns to get that back as well. That's why when the Thanksgiving banner came out, I saw Okita was on there and I was like, she's probably one of the best value quick servants on that banner. Because at least Okita, with her buffs, can do 1 really good NP damage turn, and then can follow up with a really high crit turn with a 90% crit damage, and then on the 3rd turn, potentially loop her NP again because of how good her quick cards are and how high her NP gain is. So Okita has a really good 3-turn plan, whereas Scathach is more along the lines of, I nuke them with my NP, and then I probably won't have stars because my quick cards aren't good enough to gen stars. And then unless I get like the super specific arts buster type of card Brave Chain, I'm not really going to refund a lot of NP either. So that's the main issue I have with Scathach, right? Obviously, she's really good if you just need to nuke somebody into oblivion, and you can still utilize her. Like, let's say there's a boss fight where you're going to have Scathach be the anchor for the boss fight. Like, you're going to have somebody else try to take out 2 of their HP bars, and then you just want Scathach to come in at the very end and just nuke them into oblivion and try to do the finishing blow. Things like that are still viable, especially if you don't have as good of a box. I can understand people saying that she's very valuable for that. But just in the overall grand scheme of things, you want a servant that can do very good, consistent turns, not just someone who can only do 1 big boy turn. So if you want to summon for Scathach, I totally understand. She's definitely still good, right, for those 1 turns that if you want to do, and especially if you need somebody that can just drop a nuke at the very end, that's all fine and dandy, especially because Okita's already been on raid up, so if you were going to summon for Okita, you already missed the chance. Scathach's definitely a good second runner-up to get for a quick single target servant. But I just want you guys to know that there are flaws to the servant, which is kind of the name of the game of a lot of the year 1 servants. A lot of the year 1 servants are either really broken because DW is trying something new, or they're pretty bad because DW is trying something new, or they're a little bit mixed because DW wanted to have a mix of both. And that's kind of where I think Scathach sits. She's still very good in terms of her damage, but because they were trying something whack with her kit, it really hurts her a lot and doesn't allow her to do the same thing that, say, Okita did that I described, where Okita has a really good consistent 3-turn, whereas because of how much they actually handicapped Scathach, she can't pop off to the same level. You have to get a very specific hand to do so. And even then, when you look at the damage done on all 3 turns, it's just not all that impressive. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'm sure all the simps in the comments down below are going to be like, she's the best single target servant in the game, and I don't know, then I'll just throw the math equation at them real quick. If you guys don't know, there's actual charts that show how much damage servants do over 3 turns, and that's what I base a lot of my damage turns on when I talk about, oh, this servant has like a really good 3 consistent turn. There's actual charts for how much damage the servants do over 3 turns with their buffs. And Scathach's is like really high turn 1, and then it massively drops off. But I'm sure somebody will be like, I don't like math, you know, math bad. I don't want to agree with math because my waifu, which I'm sure pop off, I guess. Sure, go ahead, dude. But with that being said, long Scathach discussion video, I guess, over with. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace late, guys.